everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by SpeedStream. I'm Jim Cardle. With the Labor Day weekend in the rearview mirror and November 4th elections fast approaching, citizens of Texas can expect to be hearing an increasing amount of political advertising and focus on elections statewide. Much has been said about the national issues of immigration reform or border security, and with President Obama's discussion on immigration reform carried out with his pen, Texans are certainly paying attention to the issue of the Hispanic vote. Will it impact Texas elections, and if so, how, is a big political question for Texas Insider's guest today, Temo Muniz with the Federation of Hispanic Republicans. The impact of Hispanic voters on November's election is the subject of today's discussion with Temo Muniz of the Federation of Hispanic Republicans. Temo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me here, Jim.
I mentioned in the intro a couple things about the Federation, and if we could get started, just simply a thumbnail for our viewers. Tell us how long you've been in existence, what you're doing this election cycle, what your mission is. Tell us a little bit about the
Sure.
Federation of Hispanic Republicans, if you would.
Well, Jim, we've started 2008, and we've grown to a auxiliary status within the Republican Party of Texas. We're in a grassroots organization with various chapters, some of the largest cities. We've formed in areas where the Republican Party of Texas before was not really present in the Hispanic community. We do, again, grassroots mobilization, community service projects. Our idea is the revitalization of civic life, where we connect small businesses, churches, local communities, rebuild the family, and really bring the conservative principles of the Republican Party to these communities. It's all about building relationships, bringing trust between the party and the community, and just, again, just pushing the brand of the Republican Party, its principles, and building the next voter base. We want to make sure that Texas stays red, and we believe we're doing a good job of that, and we're looking to expand to new chapters 2015.
You yourself, Temo, are a small businessman. You're in law school. You mentioned before we sat down. You've been, I guess, since 2008 now going into your fifth election cycle. Talk a little bit about those election cycles, and everybody's trying to address the question of the Hispanic vote. What's your growth pattern been? What's the engagement been? How much are you seeing firsthand what is generally talked about in the press?
Well, what I'm witnessing now at this point, we're watching the Republican Party of Texas as the mechanics of it, the machine, and the coalitions within organizations, starting from your Republican women's groups to our group. Everybody's coming together and really pushing towards the idea of making sure that every community is reached. Chairman Ministeri's done a good job. I know in Harris County, Paul Simpson, the new chairman, has done a good job of really beginning to engage the community with resources. We feel as when we walked and pushed the Republican ticket that we have support now. We have that support from other organizations. So you're watching Texas sort of flex its muscle. We're a strong Republican state, but I think a lot of Republicans in Texas really want to impose Texas' style or its model of how to reach the Hispanic community nationwide. The enigma of the Hispanic vote tends to be, how do you solve it at the national level with 2016 presidential race? The prototypical Hispanic in Texas represents 70% of the national Hispanic vote. Okay. If you're able to reach, in Texas, if you're able to reach a person in that community, you can really reach Florida, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, even California.
A lot of folks don't realize some of the hard political debates or division within the Hispanic community between Mexican Latinos and Cuban Latinos. But that would be a whole nother show to get into, so keep going.
So we have seen the growth within the Republican Party, the focus, people coming together. I believe this election you're going to see numbers increase. We believe that everybody, the board and members of the Federation of Hispanic Republicans believe that our hard work and the Republican Party of Texas' hard work is going to pay off. You're going to see an increase and inching towards Bush's numbers, which for us is a step in the right direction.
Well, let's get into that. You mentioned a second ago that Texas is a conservative state, certainly, but a Republican state. Some may differ. There's been a lot of discussion lately about Texas turning blue. Seems like weekly there's articles about the Hispanic increased vote in Texas. Talk about battleground Texas. You're in the fourth largest city in America, down in Houston. They battleground Texas are spending millions of dollars in this state. What do you see down there, if anything? How's the competition for the Hispanic vote playing out in Harris County?
Well, they are visible, and they are there in Harris County. One race in particular, District 144, they're present. But I think the surge within the Republican Party of showing up, building relationships, engaging the small business owners that are conservative leaning. I think what the Republican Party is here to play ball. They're showing up, and I think it's going to be tough for Battleground Texas to deliver on what they're claiming they can deliver. And I think this election we're going to see the first heavy, maybe even, who knows, knockout punch by the Republican Party of Texas towards Battleground Texas. Well, what might possibly happen is a lot of donors who are bringing money from outside, California, New York, that want to see Texas go blue, they might see the strength of the Republican Party, and they might think twice about really focusing on Texas. And hopefully they can turn their attention to other areas, and we can, from Texas, we can go out and really push the model of what is Texas engagement of the Hispanic community.
Well, you mentioned delivering on promises. A lot of folks generally down on politicians for lack of activity in Washington. Texas legislature only meets every couple of years, but they're getting a lot of the blowback as well. And on one particular promise, let me ask you, because there's a lot of discussion in the press these days about whether President Obama is going to make an executive order, an executive action with his pen on immigration. That's been promised. I know there's a lot of angst in the Hispanic community that nothing's happened. Talk about that feeling in circles that you run in. Is there concern about there being no action on immigration?
Well, definitely the Democrat Party has overreached when it comes to their approach on immigration with the Hispanic community. The biggest evidence of that is our approach in the Spanish media. Federation of Hispanic Republicans, myself, Artemio, and others. Whenever we, just recently, last week on Telemundo, we were asked about Perry and the border and the National Guard.
Okay.
And we just brought up the facts. And it was great to see the media sort of take our talking points for once. The fact that Perry is going, from a border security standpoint, he's really connecting with the Hispanic community on fear of the cartels and transnational gangs. That's something that we share in common. We don't want to see disorder. We don't want to see chaos and extortion and kidnappings here in the United States, in Texas. So the Hispanic person, who Democrat or Republican, they do see that as a problem. And President Obama has not shown up. He didn't show up to the border. He came to San Antonio, and he tried to spin that as showing up to the border. And people in Texas know that San Antonio is San Antonio. It's not at the border. And that's one thing. The second thing is, again, he promised on immigration reform, and I think the Hispanic community is fed up, and you can see the frustration. He did promise a lot to the Hispanic community. He came out and did the mariachi commercials, and but they're tired of it. They're tired of the inaction. They're tired of the executive branch not taking any type of action. And you see Governor Perry stepping up as a governor, stepping up and filling in that void. And I think the Hispanic community respects that, and they respect the fact that not only is Governor Perry taking on the cartels, which that's a huge task, but he has credibility with the Hispanic community. Governor Perry came out against SB 1070 in Arizona back when Jan Brewer pushed that, and so the Hispanic community believes Governor Perry when he says, "I'm doing this because I want to secure the border, and we've got to fight these cartels and transnational gangs." He has credibility, and I think that's paying off.
Well, you mentioned Governor Perry there. I want to get into the governor's race here in a minute, but first remind everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Texas Insider TV. We're visiting today with Temo Muniz, the president of the Texas Federation of Hispanic Republicans. Temo, if I can, you mentioned Governor Perry, and there's a governor's race between Wendy Davis, the Democrat, and Greg Abbott, the Republican, who's our sitting Attorney General. But there was a lot of analysis after the primary back in the spring about Wendy Davis's performance in the Valley, and you've mentioned President Obama's promises or lack of follow-through there. What do you hear in some of the South Texas areas where statistically Wendy Davis did not do well in her primary? Does that portend of what may happen in November, or was it an aberration because of lack of interest? Give us your gubernatorial analysis, if you would.
Again, going back to the overreach by the Democrat Party, I think the Wendy Davis, the rise of Wendy Davis happened in an echo chamber in Austin. I don't think it translates at all to the Hispanic community. She does not have relationships with the Hispanic community. I don't think she understands the history that there is, Texas history. She's sort of a artificial, astro-turf built candidate, and there's no passion. I received a phone call from a gentleman who is a city council member, and he's Democrat, and he told me, hey, he's worried. He said, look, there's no passion, no one's showing up to her events. The talking points that they usually used as ways to draw out the Hispanic community aren't working anymore. And again, that has to do with the top of the ticket, Obama, and the sort of the anger against the top of the ticket, and it has to do with her approach, her campaign's approach to the Hispanic community doesn't resonate. Things are changing. You see a lot of things as in Texas, when the Hispanic community, people are growing economically, prosperity. You got small business owners. Some of the talking points that used to work, that were race-based and identity politics, that doesn't work anymore. And so we're watching a shift, and I'm excited about the Republican Party engaging the Hispanic community. And I think we're gonna show what happens to a candidate when you don't have the credibility in the Hispanic community.
Speaking, if we can, about the Hispanic, defining what makes up the Hispanic community or not, and I'll leave this as a final question, because before we sat down you mentioned that the term itself, Hispanic, was created in fact by the U.S. Census Bureau back in the 1930s, and that there is literally a list of names on record somewhere in Washington to determine whether or not you qualify as Hispanic. Just from a pure, more historical point, I appreciate your political perspectives, but talk about that Hispanic definition just
Sure.
from an educational standpoint, if you will.
Well, Artemio Zavarro, a historian, he's been great on this as a resource. He's really introduced us to the history of the politics behind the word.
Okay.
But we know, FHR, Federation of Hispanic Republicans, we're pushing for, really, we think that the future of conservative politics, discussion when it comes to public policy is going to be basing everything on socioeconomic status, not a racial prism or identity politics. Again, our mission statement includes that too, where when we visit some of the Republican women's groups, they ask us, why do you have an Hispanic Republican group? And we always tell them, look, our focus is to guide the Republican Party to marketing the Hispanic community. It's about shifting resources. It's about showing the importance of reaching out to the community. But we believe there will be a day when we will no longer be needed. We hope, we really want that day to come where you don't have it, you don't need an Hispanic group, because we're going to be precinct chairs, you're going to have leaders within the party. So we understand the politics behind the whole Hispanic, Latino, but I think Texas of all is really showing the power and coming together as Texans. And I see the future of Texas and Republican politics, conservative politics, where you don't have this Hispanic engagement, Hispanic outreach segment. You're going to have a post-racial society, and we want to push that. We're pushing that in the media and within our grassroots. When we talk to people, everything from economic policy points, we always talk about universal traits, the universality of the pursuit of property and ambition,
Mm-hmm.
and it resonates. And so it works. That message works. And I think the Republican Party of Texas is the example behind that message.
Well, Temo, speaking of trying to reach that objective, it'd be quite a feat. We are going to let you get out the door and get back after it, but appreciate you coming in to join us. Temo Muniz with the Federation of Hispanic Republicans. Temo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Folks, if you'd like more information about the Federation of Hispanic Republicans, visit www.federationhr.org. We appreciate Temo Muniz coming in to visit with us today from the Federation of Hispanic Republicans, and appreciate you joining us for this segment of Texas Insider TV. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.